Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you want to find us, you can find us. If not, you can always check our website, which is www.blainesworld.net. It's my pleasure to introduce our first guest, but before I introduce him, I should mention that I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Solana, who is the Physical Therapy Director at Brooks-Howell Home in Asheville. Welcome aboard, Steve.
Thank you, Blaine. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here. And she mentioned that Steve, as I indicated, was Physical Therapy Director at a place called Brooks-Howell Home. And Steve, the first question I always ask a guest is, in terms of growing up as a kid, where did you grow up?
I was born in Waycross, Georgia, South Georgia, and we moved to another South Georgia town, Thomasville, Georgia. So I am from South Georgia.
Okay. And when you were a kid growing up, did you always know you want to be a physical therapy director?
No, Blaine, I still don't know what I want to be.
Join the crowd.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I do think, I definitely think that I wanted to commit my life to helping other people. That's always been my desire. I flirted and had a foray with different type of occupations initially, but once again, it was kind of all led me back. How can I figure out how to help people? And in medicine was the way for me to do that, I felt. So that's what led me to physical therapy.
So then you studied as a physical therapist and got trained as a physical therapist. But the thing I think that's kind of cool about you is that aside from just regular physical therapy, I guess some of the work you do at Brooks-Howell, you concentrate on water therapy, water aerobics.
We do. We have probably the best therapeutic pool in Asheville. It's kind of a hidden gem. Not many people realize. But yeah, I think it first started for me. It was one of my internships when I was getting my doctorate in physical therapy. I chose to do an aquatic intervention and an aquatic, internship. And it was down in Florida, obviously, because it was in the winter time. So we still need to be able to get an outdoor pool. But I had this one patient, he was a migrant worker working in the orange fields. He was like 25 years old, had fallen off a 6-foot ladder, but he had like a C4-5 neck fracture and basically was paralyzed, from the chest waist down. And he hadn't really walked in about a year or so. So we had him in the pool and he was working with me and he was able to walk in the pool. And I think it was that experience is like, aquatics, although it's not absolutely what I do, but it definitely is a benefiting, therapeutic intervention.
Now, how many years ago was that?
That was probably 13 years ago.
Okay. And so how long did that take for him to be walking in the pool?
Well, he had gone out west to a bunch of other high-level neurological places, trying to make some improvements. I think he'd already made the majority of the improvements he was going to make. It was at that point trying to figure out a constructive way to get him to continue to walk, because that was his desire. And so using some buoyant devices to kind of control his trunk, he was able to move his legs to some degree. He was able to tap into reciprocal movement in the spinal cord, and he was able to walk across the pool, and his face, his family, they were all there witnessing it. It was something that I'll never forget.
Well, it's just this story too. It's just an incredible story, but talk about him. So after he did this with the pool, what was his prognosis afterward, or what happened to him from that point?
I actually did my dissertation or my final paper on it. I was unable to follow him past when I was doing the internship. So where he is today, I've tried to look up. I've been unable to find him. But one thing I think is pretty interesting, Blaine, is that I speak a little bit of Spanish, but there were 2 interpreters there. He was from southern Mexico. He did not speak a bit of Spanish, not one word.
Yeah.
He spoke a Mayan dialect. His brother was there to translate the Mayan dialect into Spanish.
Wow.
And then there was, and I understood that, most of that, but there was also a Spanish translator to translate it into English.
Well, maybe if we get lucky, if his brother's listening or watching the show, maybe he'll pass on, that we were talking about this guy. But that's an amazing story. So that was a bunch of years ago. How do you then get more into water aquatics specifically?
I mean, I think that was always kind of at the back burner for me, and I was trained, I got my doctorate in physical therapy, but I was trained manual therapy. So a lot of use of the hands. And I've done everything from home health to hospitals, kind of the whole gambit of physical therapy, pediatrics, geriatrics. And now I'm kind of just at the point where I feel like the geriatric family, the geriatric community they're the ones who I want to serve. And so that's what I'm serving now in Asheville, as a geriatric community. And it just turns out we do have an amazing pool at the facility, and that's just a bonus that we can utilize for a number of, diagnoses.
By the way, I was going to ask you, my bad for not doing so in advance. Do you by chance have a picture of the pool handy, or can you show it? Because I saw the pictures. I was just blown away by the facility.
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it really is. It is the best therapeutic pool in Asheville. It is currently closed at this moment, waiting on a heater, some type of dehumidifier, but hopefully that'll just be for another week or two.
Well, you told me also off the air that I thought it was just only for people who live there, but it's open to, you were telling me, other people for physical therapy?
It's open, yeah, and it's not open to the public based
Right.
on certain rules and regulations with the state, but they can come with me if it's a therapeutic intervention to the pool. Otherwise, it is open to the residents of Brooks-Howell. And then, of course, anyone who's on, receiving physical or occupational therapy with our team.
Now, I'm not familiar with Brooks-Howell, so for my benefit of other people who might be watching or listening, what is Brooks-Howell?
So Brooks-Howell was founded in 1957. I might get some of this wrong, so I apologize to if anyone that's part of Brooks-Howell is watching this. It was started by the United Methodist Women, and it was started to but to give a residency for retired missionary women from around the world who have traveled the world, preaching and representing the Methodist, doctrine, and have a place for them to retire and to have a nursing facility and assisted living facility, as well as an independent side as well. And so Brooks-Howell now is a CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community. You'll hear that phrase a lot. So they do have a nursing side. They do have an independent side as well. But now it's open to all religions, it's open to non-religions. It's fully open to men and women. That was just its initial beginning. It's a special place. The artwork there is artwork that's been collected from around the world, because these missionaries traveled everywhere in the world, from Korea to the Pacific Islands. So all that artwork they brought back on their trips is now at Brooks-Howell. So it's a beautiful place just to come visit.
And describe, if you would please, the pools or the aquatic facilities that are available.
The pool itself?
Yeah.
So what exactly would you like?
How describe it, or how big is it, or how many people
Yeah,
can come to it?
It's a heated pool. In the therapeutic pool, typically the range is 88 to 90, 92 to 93 degrees. That's a therapeutic range. So you wouldn't want to be in there doing a lot of aerobic exercises, swimming a lot, because it's just a little too warm for that. It's a more therapeutic pool for like arthritic management, for arthritis, for maybe you're having some neurological, symptoms, things like that. But for arthritis, it's fantastic. And it's basically, it slopes from 3 feet down to, I think, 5 or 6 feet. So you can walk the whole length of the pool. So it's a therapeutic pool. It's not really, there's no diving board. There's nothing, it's meant for for therapy purposes.
And if you would talk about who should be using aquatic therapy, in other words, everybody's heard the term physical therapy. They sort of know what physical therapy is, but should people be seeking aquatic? How do you make the decision as to what kind of physical therapy you should have?
Yeah, I think it really depends. If people are having more pain when they're moving on land, you wake up in the morning, you're probably stiff, you're sore. That's typically a sign of arthritis. You know, the pool allows you to unweight those joints. So it allows you to move those joints. And the interesting thing about joints is that they don't have a good blood supply. So in order for joints to be healthy, they have to imbibe fluids and they have to excrete the waste. So as we age, we have a tendency to not move throughout the whole range of the joint anymore. So the pool, by nature, unweights the joint so that you can move through the entire range of motion, which we know is it's bringing in the good nutrients and excreting the bad ones.
Describe, if you would, a typical workout that somebody goes through. In other words, they contact you about getting physical therapy. And I guess you go through is a gamut of things you could do with the person. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think everyone's different, right? What you can tolerate. If you have other comorbidities, maybe you have, some heart issues that we have to watch. So everyone's going to be different. You're going to have to fine tune that appropriately. Some people are much higher level and they can do high level balance. That's the other thing in the pool, that you can do high level balance interventions as well. You can do dynamic ambulation or walking interventions as well. But typically it doesn't really matter if you're on land or aquatics, but in aquatics specifically, typically there's a warm-up period. So that warm-up period is like 3 to 5 minutes. So you're loosening things up, you're doing some dynamic stretches, which is different from static stretching. If you're watching any of the sports today, everyone is typically doing dynamic stretches first, followed by some static stretching. So dynamic stretches is you're going through the motions, you're stretching the joints, you're warming up the tissues prior to maybe doing some static stretching, which is being still and just stretching without moving.
Now, are you in the pool with the person as to doing these workouts?
Sometimes, yep, absolutely. Or I'm on the side. Really depends. Every person is different.
How long is the workout typically?
It really, once again, Blaine, it kind of goes back to the person. Some people can only tolerate 20 minutes. Some people, 60 minutes is, that's okay. I mean, one example, Blaine, of course, she was a professional ballet dancer, but I was seeing her down in Florida when I was just starting out my PT career. And I was working for this small kind of sports clinic. And, she was a professional ballet dancer. And I told the owner, I was like, listen, I know we're typically supposed to do like 60 minutes with the patient. It takes me 60 minutes just to warm her up, so we had to accommodate, the fact that she was at much higher level. So even someone as they age, they're going to be at different levels. It really depends on the person.
Now, when they work with you, do you then work with them at one-on-one, but then do you give them exercise or stuff they should be doing without you?
100%. And you always want to transition from the aquatic setting back to land-based setting, because that's where we live. We live with gravity instead of the buoyancy of the water, so the whole idea is to get you back moving freely with less pain, with better balance, back on land, and using the pool as much as we need to kind of gain those improvements.
So now the folks at BLAINESSWORLD, they can see you in terms of physical therapy, but they can also, they have the advantage, they can use the pool on their own, right? If they don't want to. If you're recommending to one of your patients or client or anybody using the pool, you mentioned getting on land, but is there a maximum or minimum amount of time you should be in the pool? Like if they're doing this on their own?
I don't think so. I think that I think it really depends on the person. I mean, if you have some heart issues, one thing that the pool does is it has hydrostatic pressure. So there's, the pool has, the chemical properties that we know, H2O, and how abundant it is in our world. It also has physical properties. And one of those physical properties is hydrostatic pressure. So basically from all points, there's pressure being put on any type of surface. So if you have like some heart issues, you do have to be kind of cautious because it could push fluid up. So it really depends. It really depends on the person. I mean, I would like to, I feel like I would need to at least see them and kind of determine what I feel like their program should be.
Do some folks, and I might be in that category, tell you they don't like the water or they don't want to be in the water at all?
Absolutely, absolutely. Some people don't want to put on bathing suits. I totally get it. They
Yeah.
don't want to.
But do they eventually get past that?
No, no, they don't, Blaine. They don't. There are some residents, some patients that I've had that like the pool is, I mean, I don't push the pool. I mean, obviously we live on land, so that is my ultimate goal. But there are some people that have so much pain with movement that the pool allows them to move without pain. And I need that joint to move without a lot of pain. So there have been a few instances where I've asked people like, listen, you're in so much discomfort. The pool is actually going to probably decrease your pain and help us move. And they say, absolutely no. So
That must be a revelation for you, or a very exciting moment for you, though, when you convince somebody to get in the pool and then they tell you that this is pretty cool. Does that happen a lot?
I don't think that's ever happened.
No, meaning that they didn't want to get in, but then they tried it and they were happy they went through the pool therapy.
I think everyone has less pain in the pool. I'll tell you that, Blaine. I don't know if there's one instance of a person who refused. I think when they refuse, I don't push back,
Sure.
Blaine, because this is a geriatric family, and I respect their wishes 100%. So, if they tell me no, they don't feel comfortable, then I 100% don't push it. But I do think for the people that are in a lot of discomfort, the pool really does. They immediately tell me, hey, I'm in less pain. There's no doubt about it.
Talk about, if you would, the process of working with a physical therapist in general, not just for pool, but for any physical therapy you go through. So first of all, how do you choose a physical therapist?
I think asking friends, family, word of mouth on who you think is, a good organization, a good clinic, a good physical therapist is absolutely important to figure out and make sure you're going to get the right care. I think everyone is different. So, when someone does book an appointment with us, it's a review of their past medical history, really taking care to observe any issues that might come up during therapy, and then trying to find where they have limitations and trying to find out what their goals are. I think that's absolutely crucial as well. If their goal is to get back hiking a mile and we're doing exercises, lying down there, I don't know that we're going to get back to walking that mile hiking. So really listening to them and what they want to do, and then fine tuning our interventions so they can achieve those goals.
Are there any questions folks should ask a physical therapist? In other words, if I was seeing you for the first time, what should I want to find out about?
I mean, I've always encouraged people, I tell them, I was like, if you're not seeing improvements in 3 to 4 weeks, let's talk. I need to make a referral back to your physician. We need to, depending on the situation, right? So, but yeah, just to be absolutely honest with me, I mean, our patients know more about their bodies than we will ever know. So they know when they hurt the most. They know if an exercise is causing them problems. They know what their limitations are. So just listening to them, but I always encourage people to, and I'll tell them up front, if we're not seeing improvements in 3, 4, depending on the situation, maybe 6 weeks, maybe we need to figure something else out.
How often do I have to see a physical therapist, be it you or anybody else?
That's a good question, Blaine. It really depends on what the limitations are. So done a lot of research on this. So if you're talking about muscle strength, the research is that we have to work on resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. That's pretty much where the research is. So I would say 2 to 3 times a week for muscle strengthening. If you want to work on balance, it's much more frequently, so we're looking at 4 to 5 times a week, minimal. So if you've been falling some, or if you're concerned about falling, then I would say at least for a short period of time is pretty frequently. So it really depends on what you're coming in for.
It's interesting you said that balance, because I guess not that I fall a lot, but a concern I guess a lot of people have or should have. And I guess the problem you must see as a physical therapist is, I guess a lot of people should have a concern, but they don't, that they never thought that somebody could help them with a balance. Balance is something that you can work with people on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, it is typically going to need to be more frequently. And I do get a little pushback from, I would say, some of my patients. They don't want to come to therapy for 4 or 5 times a week. And I totally get it. 100%. But if you really want to show improvements in balance, that's what the research is saying. It needs to be frequent, but it doesn't need to be forever, right? So there are, there's an initial balance training, but then there are things that you can just immediately transfer to home if the patient will adhere to the recommendations of a home exercise program. Then I think really seeing a therapist really shouldn't be that long if it's truly balanced.
The one I'm reading about is for everybody to check their balance is, what is it? Standing on one foot and see how long you can stand on one foot. What does that show?
It probably is more of an indication of how strong your leg is, to be honest with you, Blaine. I think if you've got neuropathy, in the leg where you've lost some feeling. I mean, there are three balance systems in our body. There's the inner ear, which is called our vestibular system. There's our vision that we use predominantly. And then there's what we call proprioception, which is what our joints and what the receptors in our legs and our feet are telling us. So if you're walking outside and it's pitch black, you can't see anything, and you step on a rock, you're probably going to know that's a rock, right? You know that's a rock because you're using that balance system and you accommodate for it, right? So if you're down one of these three balance systems, and I tell people you probably need to be focusing on balance, because one of your three are already, slightly, there's a deficit in those three, one of them. So you need to be working on balance. But
Put you on the spot. Give an example of an exercise that somebody could do to improve their balance, or just describe it or show it. In others, if I have that concern, I come see you. Do you give me some specific exercise I should be doing to improve balance?
I think if you were just asking for one exercise,
Right.
just one, and I get that, because people ask me, I'm willing to do one. Which one?
Exactly. Sounds like me.
I would say the most functional exercise, other than walking, the most functional exercise, and the studies have shown that typically falls are due to lower leg, your leg weakness. We call it lower extremity weakness, but that's really the reason why the majority of the people fall, is because of weakness. That's not always the case. There are balance deficits. So I would work on repetitive sit to stands. And what that is working on standing up from a relatively low chair without using your arms, building up to 10, 15 reps at a time, and doing that probably twice a day. So you may be doing 30 reps. But if you have hip arthritis and knee arthritis, or hip and knee pain, you do have to be cautious with that, because that can aggravate it. But if you ask me to do one exercise, repetitive squats, not squats, but repetitive sit to stands.
This is funny. I work with a physical trainer, and that's what she has me do, that same exercise. That's not my favorite exercise, but it has value to it for doing it.
Most functional outside of walking.
Is it sit stand? Good advice. The in terms of getting in touch with Steve Solana, Solana, is that pronunciation, Solana?
Yep.
How do people reach you or find you?
So you can reach me at 828-258-1034. That's our office number at Brooks-Howell. If you wanted to reach Brooks-Howell and just come visit it and see some of the artwork, you could call them at, I think it's 253-6712. But Blaine, I am an advocate for prevention. So if anyone has a question, and if I have time, I would absolutely answer it. So if you want to reach me by email, you can reach me at positivemotionrehab@gmail.com.
And by the way, I love that even handle for it. Positive. What was it? Positive. I'll have you repeat it.
positivemotionrehab@gmail.com.
And by the way, how does somebody know that they need to see a physical therapist? In other words, if you're in an accident, of course, you'll see a physical therapist oftentimes. But if somebody's listening or watching, what's a determination that it may be a good idea for them to see a physical therapist?
Well, I think that's a conundrum, right? I think we all wait long. We wait until we're really hurting. And I think then we get into kind of the healthcare system. I truly believe in trying to come up with some creative way to do prevention. Staying active, having the right program can and does show, they've proven it will keep you away from, injuries longer. But typically people wait until the pain is so severe that, they go to see their orthopedic physician or a physician. The physician say, hey, let's try therapy. Or maybe they had a fall. They weren't expecting to have a fall. No one is. They'll go see the physician. The physician will say, hey, let's try therapy. So unfortunately, it typically takes either a lot of pain or some drastic, fall or injury for people to get into therapy. It's not always the case. Some people are more proactive.
But what's sad about it, and what you're saying in a way, is that even if you want to be proactive, if I wanted to see you, you can't just go to a physical therapist and expect to be covered by insurance. You have to get it covered first, kind of thing, right?
You can. So this is, there's different states, different laws. You don't need, so in order for you to, you can come see a therapist, but in order for insurance to cover it, we need to get the physician to give an order for physical therapy in order for the insurance to cover it. At least that's Medicare rules, and people follow Medicare rules. Having said that, certain people will come to me because they have a relationship with their physician where it's kind of open, where the physician knows, these people, they know they need assistance. And so they'll come to me and I'll call their physician and say, is it okay for me to go ahead and see this patient without you having to go in and see your physician for it? But, if you have that relationship, a lot of times it's just a phone call to the physician saying, I'm having increased pain, I'm having limited mobility, I'm concerned about my balance, or whatever the reason may be. And that's enough.
The point's well taken, because that was what my doctor did. I didn't have to go in for a special visit. I had a problem and he just assigned me to see a physical therapist, which is kind of cool. I have to ask you about one other thing that when I read about it, I thought it was really cool. And that's the great award, the Paul Diaz Caring Award from the Kindred Healthcare. What was that about?
Yeah, so I was surprised in 2019, not only the Brooks-Howell, it wasn't really the Brooks-Howell facility, but Brooks-Howell administration, my patients and my coworkers all got together and made a video of why they felt like I deserved an award for an excellence in compassionate care, going above and beyond with my patients. And so they made a video, they submitted it with the company. The companies have changed hands a little bit since then during COVID, but this was in 2019, at November 2019, right before COVID. They had about 50 to 70,000 employees across the nation, a lot of them in hospitals, a lot of them in smaller clinics like ourselves. But they surprised me one day and said, hey, we nominated you for this award. And I was just like, why? It's just like, I really, truly didn't understand why I was being nominated for something that I do every day. It was part of my job was to go in and provide compassionate care, because I feel like our geriatric community deserve it. But anyway, I ultimately won the award. They flew us up to Louisville, Kentucky, and it was definitely special. Something I'll never forget. I was treated like royalty, even if it was for a day or two.
Okay, very well. That's pretty cool. And to recap, I should mention that folks are listening or watching to the Blaine's World show I'm not quite sure. We may be having some technical difficulties, but at least they see you, Steve. So that's a good sign. And I'm speaking with Steve Solana, Physical Therapy Director at Brooks-Howell Home in Asheville. And Steve, once again, in terms of reaching you, best bet is to, you said email. I'll have you give it once again is.
Yeah, it's positivemotionrehab@gmail.com.
Okay. And if I can have you give the phone number, but I'll have to ask you to give it slow and I'll ask you to repeat it.
Absolutely. So 828-258-1034.
Okay. And Steve very graciously said, if anybody has a question, just give you a call and he'll try to help them out.
100%. I mean, even if it's to answer simple questions or to provide some, just some advice, I'm happy to help, really. I mean, I feel like that was my calling, Blaine. So I'm happy to provide that service for anyone.
Okay, and I should mention one other thing. I don't know if you have it handy, but if you want to see pictures of this pool, which will knock your socks off, or also find out more about Brooks-Howell Home, do you by chance have a website handy, or is it just Brooks-Howell? We'll see if you get.
I think if you would just, I should, but Brooks-Howell Home, if you will just search that,
You'll find it.
Will pop up first. There's only one. Brooks-Howell Home in Asheville, North Carolina. It's downtown. It's a hidden gem. It's like 7 acres, right beside Trader Joe's.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah, you would never know it's there. It's right across the street from Claxton Elementary. You drive by it. Most people drive by it every single day. Don't even know it exists, but it's a hidden gem. So Brooks-Howell Home. If you'll just look that up, you can see pictures of the pool.
Okay, I appreciate you telling about it because again, it was hidden to me, and I drive just yesterday. I drove right by that where you said.
We try to keep it that way, Blaine. We try to keep it hidden.
Okay, that's cool. But anyway, I thank you for being my guest this Blaine's World podcast. Hope to see you if you're listening or watching next week or anytime you can find us on any of the podcast availabilities. Also, like to thank my producer Cappy Tassetti. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Steve, I'll have you say goodbye and just say with me 1 second as we say goodbye.